from the studios at Hull Bay Productions, this is Season 3 of the PowerPLAY Show. Now, here's Tonya McGrath.
Welcome to our season finale of the PowerPLAY Show. I'm your host, Tonya McGrath. I'm excited for our conversation today because we are going to discuss my top 5 stories of the year, and my guests will share what their story of the year is. So let's get this show started. With me is my former boss and dear, dear friend, Linda Polach. She was former executive producer at WGBH and former executive director of the GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. Attorney Joseph Feaster, counsel at Dain, Torpy, Wiest Garner, PC, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. And Adrian Walker, associate editor and columnist for the Metro section of the Boston Globe. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much, Tonya.
First, I want to start with just how everyone's year has been. And I'll start with you, Linda. You had some big news this year.
I did. Well, I did a lot in the first part of this year, continued the production of our State of Race shows at GBH and ended up with a finale on Black Joy at the library. So that was very big. Culminated about 2 years worth of work. But then I retired. So I guess I'm in the vacation mode of retirement. Everybody said there are stages, and the first one is vacation, and that's how I feel.
And Adrian, how's your year been? Busy, I know that.
My year's been busy. It's been fun. I've been writing columns and working on a long-term project, and I'm envying Linda. Vacation sounds wonderful.
Come on over. Come on down. Great.
And Attorney Feaster, you've also had some big changes this year.
Yeah, I did. I don't think I'm ever going to retire, Linda, and I'm just going to go away. I go from right here to the crematory. That's what my plan is. But no, I've had some fascinating things happen. One, I made a change in terms of law firms. I'm now with the Dain, Torpy, and you definitely did pronounce all the names accurately, Tonya. And the other thing is just my work with the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. We're on the board chair, have developed a very strong board of directors, and we're in the search for our CEO. We're at the culmination of that search for CEO, so stay tuned.
All right. Well, let's jump right in. My first story of 2022 is the slap scene around the world. Yep. During the Oscars this year on March 27th, Will Smith walked on stage and slapped comedian Chris Rock in his face. Hard, like you heard it. Smith was apparently responding to a joke about Jada's hair loss, and he didn't like it. Attorney, you were a guest on the PowerPLAY Show about this shortly after the incident, and I'll start with you. What did you think then, and how do you feel now?
My view hasn't changed. I've heard that at least Will has tried to come out with an apology because it was quite a bit of backlash as a result of that. And my response was then, I'm a New York guy, and so my sense was that I guess they would have had to go to commercial had it been me that he came up and slapped.
Yep.
So, and I just thought that it was totally out of character. I looked back at the remark that was made, the joke that was made. It wasn't it wasn't racy. It wasn't overly offensive. I think he overreacted, and I think he has paid the price as a result of that, and rightfully so. The one who was slapped, he handled it, I guess, as a gentleman would, and played it off. But I'm not sure that would have been my response had that occurred.
And Linda, so we know that he was basically kicked out of the academy for 10 years, but I don't really see much of his life really changed. I mean, he went quiet for a little bit, but what was your first initial reaction, and how have you felt the response has been?
Well, I have to say, I watched it live, and it looked fake to me. Like, I kept thinking, is this some crazy producer, thinking as producers, is some crazy producer's idea of a way of getting attention and livening up the program? And then when I realized it was real, it really was a stunner. I think, as Joe said, partly because of his reputation in the industry. But I take issue a little with what you said, Joe, about the joke not being too bad or being mild, I guess. I mean, we just don't know how that sat with him and with Jada. And it may be that alopecia is just such a difficult situation or thing for her to deal with that he lost it. I mean, either way, violence is no good. And the one thing that I do remember from that night is feeling, sitting next to my husband, who's a Black man, that this was the worst possible thing for a Black movie star who has a lot of power in some ways to act, to feed into some people's stereotypes, of the angry Black man. So he didn't do himself any favors. I mean, he's got a new movie out. I don't know if it will impact people's viewing of that, but shame on him in a way, not being grown up enough to contain his feelings.
Adrian?
Well, I thought it was appalling at the time, and I never thought it was fake. I always thought it was real. And, and he compounded it with that loony acceptance speech, an hour later when he won Best Actor. Let's not forget about that, because that was seriously crazy. And, I guess he's paid a price, but he's also, a wealthy, famous movie star who's going to stay a wealthy, famous movie star. So, it doesn't seem like a huge price to me for an appalling piece of behavior.
And, not much has really been heard from Chris Rock. I remember he had a show in Boston like the following week. And he said something like, "So how was your weekend?" But he really hasn't said much since then. And, I don't know if it's like so much taking the high road, but, my producer was like, I can't wait to hear from this guy. And I don't know. I mean,
Tonya, I think that by doing that, Chris Rock made it a non-story. That's exactly what he did. If he had continued to keep the story alive, as you can say, you raising out how much other than Will, and to Linda's point, which was talking about he has a new movie out. He came out recently before the movie was out trying to be apologetic. That's what he was doing, trying to, pander to that particular issue. But I think, Chris Rock, he took the hit. Like I said, I would have handled it entirely differently, but that's my style. But I think now what he did basically said it's a non-issue. It's going away. It didn't, there was other things which dominated the news, and you have some of them on this list that took precedence. So I think it's a non-story at this point. We'll see what happens with Will's movie as it comes out.
My guess is that Oprah will get the interview whenever Chris decides to talk.
You're probably right.
So from disturbing to celebration, my next story on my list is the appointment and subsequent swearing in of Associate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first African-American woman to sit on the United States Supreme Court. I have to say, I didn't think a Black woman would sit on the Supreme Court in my lifetime, but I also didn't think a lot of things would happen on the Supreme Court in my lifetime. But Adrian, this was a huge deal.
Well, I want to mention another one of her firsts, which is that as a Miami native, I feel compelled to point out that she is the first person from Miami on the Supreme Court, and it's about time for that. No, but seriously, it's fantastic. She's ultra qualified. I think she's going to be a great justice, and it's just a great moment for the country. She couldn't have been a better choice.
And attorney, this is in your kind of genre of work. What were your thoughts?
I was elated, not only from just of her appointment, but because one of her roommates is one of my mentees here in Boston, and in fact is teaching at NU Law right now, Northeastern University School of Law. I might as well let the listening audience know what I'm referring to. And it just was a historic moment. I mean, but it was historic in a number of ways. Just what Adrian just pointed out, won her, and you did, as being the first Black woman. I'm like Adrian. He's a Miamian. He says, hey, she's from Miami. He's going to take pride in where she's from, as I would as a New Yorker if she was from New York. But the other piece is expanding the number of women on the court. And certainly, and I'll just give, I'll be the one, because even though I'm licensed to practice before the Supreme Court. I won't be going there anytime soon, so my statement here probably won't affect me adversely. But the other black person on the court has not acted in that manner in terms of the way that Justice Thomas has looked at cases, and there's even some of the cases and things that are going on now with regards to, his wife's involvement in different things, the issue that's coming up around some of the voting rights issues. So I'm glad to see her there for a host of reasons, and it will bode well, particularly for black people generally, and I think for black women in particular.
And Linda, what were your thoughts around this? I mean, it was certainly, I was starting to cringe a little bit during her confirmation hearings, but everything worked out well in the end, I should say.
Well, I think it's historic, exciting. I don't know. I think we're always happy to see diversity reign in areas where it's been left out and ignored. The problem for me is that the justices on the more liberal side are still very much in the minority. And so even with her appointment, we may not see as much change as maybe we would like to see. So there are a lot of cases coming up next year that are really significant. And we'll see if she can make a difference. But these are difficult and sort of bleak times, I think, for those of us who'd like to see the court act in a fairer, more liberal way.
I absolutely agree. Okay, let's move on, because I absolutely refuse to talk about Kanye West. I had to pick kind of the next best thing, which is Elon Musk's purchase and, I would say, crippling of Twitter. He spent $44 billion to essentially kick everyone off the platform that he chose to do. Am I missing something? Like, Attorney Fieser, what do you see happening here? And I'll get to the poll situation a little bit after your comment.
Well, I've never been an Elon Musk acolyte at any point in time, particularly because of his political persuasion. So it wasn't hard for me to not dismiss what was going on with Twitter, because as we all will recall, leading up to the purchase of that, it stayed in the news for almost a year in the sense of the back and forth. And in fact, I thought the deal had been off for a period of time, and then all of a sudden it occurred again. I just think it just shows you, once again, it almost akin to what Adrian was talking about when he mentioned the Will Smith one. With money, you can do a whole bunch of different things. You can be as arrogant as you want to be. And you can be dismissive of people and ruin lives as much as you want. And that's what Elon Musk has done here. But I think this is a situation that may backfire on him, because he's going to be looked at by the congressional bodies are looking at what he's doing. He's lost definitely in terms of employees. If he had any brand because of his other ventures, those are certainly being diminished. So I think there's a price for him to pay with a level of arrogance. And I think he follows in the footsteps of the person who is very much supportive of that former president as well. So I think, we'll see what happens going forward. But I think it's going to be a tough road for Twitter going forward. And I think that others are now seeing that, and they smell blood in the water. And I think that there's going to be some movement to have some other types of persons who are involved in that field of work.
I mean, Adrian, he has thrown people off. He has thrown the press off. He has come back. They then allowed them back. A lot of celebrities have just decided not to play his little games. I mean, he's just, and then he sends out this poll basically saying, if you guys want me to step down, I will. But he doesn't have any desire to step down. I mean, what was that all about?
I mean, it's hard to imagine a worse takeover of a company than this one. It's not just celebrities that are bailing. His big problem is his advertisers are bailing because they don't want to be associated with what he's turning Twitter into. And the other thing we shouldn't forget is that he's tanking Tesla too. Their stocks declining rapidly because there's nobody running that company. So, I mean, it's all just an incredible mess. But it just goes to show you, sometimes in this country, we think that if you're wealthy, you must be just through the roof brilliant. Maybe not, right? Because look at what he's doing. None of what he is doing has made any sense. Twitter is a shell of the company it was a few weeks ago, and his other company's going to go down with it.
Linda, it reminds me of the story of the little boy who wants to take his ball and go home because he doesn't want to play with anyone else. I mean, he's really just kind of destroying something that I think a lot of people, even people in the news industry, have relied on in terms of breaking news, in terms of getting information. And, like Adrian said, it's just becoming a joke in itself.
I mean, we can't forget the attack on journalism that comes from this man, too. Squelching any competition, banning reporters who even call up for interviews. What kind of maniacal person does that? I mean, we could easily draw up a list, couldn't we, of stupid rich people? There's just so many of them, right? And he might just top the list. And as Adrian said, you would think people with a lot of money would avail themselves of learning, education, wisdom. Not necessarily. I guess we could put him, it's sort of in the same category as Will Smith. I mean, just maybe having so much money and power makes you immune to reason in some ways. I don't know. I can't figure it out. And also, what person has a poll and ask people what they think about his leadership when it's been a disaster? Of course, over 50% said, he should leave. But you're right. He even said, well, there is no successor to me. So who would take on this job? It's a pain in the neck, basically. So there you go. Looks like he'll be staying on for a while.
I don't know, Linda, because I think Snoop Doggy Dogg said he would.
That's right.
No kidding.
He did. He put out a tweet.
And I happen to like Snoop Doggy Dogg, too.
It's funny. My daughter works at Universal Pictures, and they had their Christmas party, and Snoop Dogg was the guest. And I'm like, that seemed really random. Well, I guess his biography is being produced by Universal Pictures. So you should stay tuned, Joe.
Oh yeah. Hey, listen, I want to meet him. So Tonya or anybody can make that introduction. Love to meet him.
I'll see what my daughter can do.
Get him to follow you on Twitter.
There you go. But even what he did to his staff. I mean, he came in. All of a sudden, people were being laid off. People were told if they don't come into the building, you're fired, essentially. And, Twitter's not something that you have to be in person to do. I mean, the whole basis of the platform is that you can do it from anywhere. So that just seemed like he's just like a really angry little man.
No, I think it's more in terms of a sense of arrogance. I think it goes to the point that all of us are saying. I mean, at some point in time, you believe there are persons who get to a certain place, Tonya, who believe that they're above it all. It's just like those that believe they're above the law. And I won't go down that path. That's not on this show. That's not one of the topics, at least not right now. But there are people who just believe that they can do as they wish. They can treat people as they want with total disregard. And that's what he's doing. And he is a little man, because in certain other situations he would be whimpering as opposed to acting like he's so mighty, in my view.
One of our NFL writer, Ben Volen, was hacked on Twitter a week ago. And, he didn't want to start another account because he's got tens of thousands of followers. So he needed somebody at Twitter to fix the problem. So usually we just pick up the phone, and people here know people at Twitter, and they get it taken care of. But of course, everybody we used to know has been fired or laid off. So, you can't fix any Twitter problems anymore. That's kind of the state of the company. It's hollowed out.
I think that Twitter is going to just kind of go by the wayside at some point. And there'll be another platform that gets created at some point to replace it. But he certainly hasn't done anything constructive with the company. So we'll see.
Quite a way to burn $44 billion.
Exactly.
He could do a lot with that money.
You spent $44 billion to just kick people off as you will. I mean, anyways. Next.
Because he knows he'll make 44 million more.
That's true. Billion.
Yeah, 44 billion more. Yeah.
Next is the story I couldn't get enough of because, well, they made it really hard to ignore, and that is the hearings on the January 6th insurrection. The committee wrapped up yesterday giving the recommendations of charges to the Department of Justice for former President Donald Trump. And Linda, a news junkie like myself, I found it hard not to watch these hearings.
Yeah, me too. Or I'd try to get away to do some work, and then my husband or somebody would yell, "Get to the TV right now and watch." Riveting stuff, hard to believe. I think the gravity of it, I think I'm still trying to absorb. I have all along throughout the 18 months, but just in the final days, hearing some of that testimony. I heard on NPR yesterday, one of the analysts that was asked what moment from the hearings really moved her or, had the biggest impact. And she said when some of the people testified, I think it was Capitol Police, who said they were standing in their own blood and saw people going down next to them. It really is tough to believe that the person who was elected to be president was largely responsible for how that came down, for not doing anything to disrupt the riot. It's been a year, hasn't it? I mean, I think that is single-handedly, that riot, raised, maybe in some bizarre, weird way, it raised our own awareness about the threat to democracy, which is such a huge problem, whether it's voting rights in Georgia or, the legitimization of a particular vote somewhere, just media, knowing what's true, what's not true. It's just been a tough year. And throw in, some other things that have happened. I hope we learn a lesson. I don't know. The people who are followers of President Trump, I'm not sure this will change their minds, although it does feel like some Republicans are sort of now beginning to distance themselves from him. But that was another one of those, just when it actually happened, would not believe that was going down. Hearing Secret Service people testify later that they called their loved ones because they thought they were going to die that day. I get the chills just remembering that and talking about it.
Yeah, I think the biggest impact for me watching these hearings was listening to the officers. And as we know that, a couple of them committed suicide as a result of what happened on January 6th. Attorney Feaster, it seems to me that, we know that the process is that only the Department of Justice can actually charge former President Trump with anything. But do you see that this is actually doable, that we can actually hold him accountable for what happened on January 6th?
Well, Tonya, I'm going to start at a different place because while Adrian claimed Justice Jackson, I, as a New Yorker, I'm not going to claim Donald as a New Yorker. I harken back to 2016 because I've been waiting all along to find out when somebody somehow was going to catch up with Donald Trump. So I've been waiting for all of that period of time, for all of the things that we've heard from the time of while he was running for the candidacy and then ultimately in office. All of the things that were done were unprecedented. I've been around for quite some time and I've to a number of presidencies and I've never seen anything like this. Let me get to your specific question. I was happy to see the January 6th committee from the standpoint of getting the information out. I am disappointed in the January 6th committee because my belief is And I find this oftentimes with the Democrats versus the Republicans. If the Republicans were running this committee, they would already, in my view, already be persons who are, at higher ups who would have been totally castigated, totally involved, possibly already in a DOJ being in criminal proceedings. And that's not the case here. And I don't understand what Garland is doing or not doing, and they're moving on. And now we get this right as when this committee is going to be disbanded and out of power. So my sense of it is, my disappointment was in terms of the way the process went about. I'm pleased by the fact that the information has gotten out. Now, to the sense of the prosecution, I don't have a clue. I don't have any sense as to what this Justice Department will do with regards to those charges. I think that the charges were legitimately, the evidence is there for a finding in all of those. I even think the evidence is there for the sedition, but the committee wouldn't reach that particular one. They're very cautious and want to make sure that they cross all the T's and dotted all the I's, as they said. And I just think they aren't aggressive enough. Just like I talked about how I respond with regards to Will Smith, I would respond differently if I was sitting in that place, and certainly if I was sitting in Justice Department. So I don't think we should get our hopes up that anyone is going to get the Donald. He's demonstrated to me that he is surrounded with Teflon the period of time, and that might continue. My hope and prayer is that the convictions do come, that in fact he is charged, that he is in fact convicted, and he's not able to have any federal or state governmental position. I think that would be a good result beyond just some of the Mar-a-Lago and all the other cases that he has going.
Adrian, we know that Donald Trump, to very low kind of pomp and circumstance, he announced his bid for presidency in 2024. So what do you think is going to happen? I mean,
Well, I want to back up for a second and say that I'm not sure I agree about Trump and all this Teflon. I think that what we're seeing is his popularity is clearly declining. I think you saw that in the results in November. A lot of his candidates went down. A lot of, all of the election deniers went down. I think the air is seeping out of this balloon as we speak. And I think the January 6th committee has been part of that, I mean, before the committee even started, there was all this punditry saying that, it's not going to mean anything. Everybody's already made up their mind and all of that. And I don't think that's true. I think it's had a real impact. I think it's had an impact on the way the country thinks about January 6th. And I think it's had an impact on the way people think about Trump as well. As for his campaign announcement, I think it's almost a joke. He can't run for president. He's under investigation for all kinds of things. It's not just the January 6th committee. Half the Justice Department was already investigating. There's tax stuff. There's all kinds of stuff. He'll be lucky if he's not in jail by the time New Hampshire rolls around in 2024. So, I don't think the hopes are very high for Trump 2024. Although there is a piece of me that would like to see a Trump-DeSantis GOP primary, because I think it'll tear the party apart. And I think that would be Biden's best path to victory.
How about those cards that he put out? The collector's cards. I mean, if that doesn't tell you something, right?
The guy is just a grifter. That's it.
Yeah, those things are hilarious. I've seen a couple of them. Put them in the category with Elon Musk, and there are a list of very wealthy, ridiculous people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tonya, I would like for you to do a program on this question about Trump. Because what my point is this: I'm looking at and responding to your question about whether he would be convicted as a result of what the committee has found. Adrian could be correct. I'm not even the loss of many of those candidates were because a lot of them were jokes as far as the candidates that were put forward. And I think, again, we had a situation, and agreeing with Linda, the arrogance factor came into play. He thought that his name would make each and all of those candidates successful. But just think about it. Just think about the Georgia race. on what planet should there even be a question between the candidates in Georgia? I mean, when we had
was shocked. It was.
I had to think. I have friends and family in Georgia, and I said, "Y'all better do whatever you got to do." I was congratulating them after the result, but look how close it was.
I know.
And if you're talking about how disparate those two candidates were, that should have been a landslide. We shouldn't even have gotten to a runoff. So, while diminished. Yeah. If I still say, if there was the right type of candidates in many of those states, I mean, the same, you go to Pennsylvania, there was a lot of the, candidates just weren't up to par and they went along. If there were the right types of candidates, we may have had a different results even in, in some of those races. So I want to see the conviction. That's going to be the telling point for me. That's what I'm going to look for. The rest of the stuff is going to be, I understand the questions that we have around our democracy and all of these things. That's going to be a very interesting 2023, and Adrian will be writing up there, and Linda may come out of retirement and be talking about it, because it's going to be something to watch. But
absolutely,
I want to see the conviction.
Oh, don't we all?
And how about, I think I read somewhere Mike Pence's defense of Trump was that although it was reckless, it wasn't illegal. How can he possibly say that? The man was left to die by his boss, and yet
I didn't have much respect for Mike Pence before, and I lost whatever was there because, him not testifying before the January 6th committee, but will write a book, right? Because, that's what you do. You run for office and then you write a book, right? But I thought it was just very selfish, because I think if Pence had actually testified and we could hear from him, one, what those conversations were between him and Trump during that time. What was he hearing from Secret Service? What was he hearing from National Guard? What was happening to help this situation? And he just didn't want to do it. And
I'd like to know how scared he was.
Exactly.
Right? In his own words,
that
he was petrified. Maybe he wasn't, but I know I would have been, had I been rushed down those stairs and down in the basement or whatever, the bowels of the Capitol, hidden. Politics is just a strange, what's the expression? It's a strange thing.
Linda, we could get some pictures of what was going on in his body as things were happening while he was in that garage, I'm sure, in terms of you feel. But to your point, Tonya, why would he come out against when he's maybe thinking about running for president and anger that same base, that 33%? He's not going to do it. Why? That's the whole issue.
Do you think he's really going to want to run for president?
It doesn't matter. If he's even thinking about it, wants to be influenced, he's not going to come out and go up against the Donald at that particular point in time.
Yeah, we don't know how afraid he was on January 6th, but one thing we know is that he's terrified of Donald Trump.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. So I mean, it's all of those, but I think even looking forward in terms, because listen, if some were trying to give him being heroic for doing what he's supposed to do as vice president, or also staying at the Capitol, which I think really did protect the situation. Absolutely, by his not, because the Secret Service tried to drive him away from the Capitol. But no, he doesn't get any heroism badge from me. And, in street vernacular, he would have been beat up a lot of times, and that's because it's just the way that he just presents himself. He's a punching bag for Donald Trump.
Well, I was just going to say, another one of the images that really stuck with me is the testimony. I can't remember if it was Hope Hicks or one of his aides who talked about the 3 hours or whatever. He was sitting in the dining room watching. He sat there and watched television. I can't remember if it's before or after he threw his lunch against the wall and it splattered all over the wall. He sat there and watched this happening and did nothing for 3 hours.
Yep.
Yeah, it was Hope.
Was it Hope?
It was Hope. She was,
Well, last on my list, and I don't know how much of a debate or conversation it is, but it's the cost of everything. I mean, everything. Inflation has just changed so much for so many people in this country. And I have a few stats just to kind of point out where we were at the peak. The national average for a gallon of gas was $5.01, over $8 if you lived on the West Coast. Grocery prices are up 12% from last year, the largest 12-month increase since 1979. And the U.S. residential electricity averages have gone up 8% in some areas and up to 34% in others. I mean, it's so bad that when my son Javier asks me for a ride somewhere, I ask him for gas money. I'm kidding. I don't. But I just may, because, you know, that's what it is. And, you know, I don't know when we're going to kind of see a change in this.
Well, gas has been coming down for months, though. It hit $5, but it's nowhere near that now.
It's $3.29, I think now. I'm still looking for those 240 days.
You know, I'm not an economist. In fact, I'm sorry to admit I've never taken an economics class in any of my years in college or grad school. And it's hard for me to wrap my brain around it. I try to learn about what inflation means, and I've had the same conversation with my husband about 5 times as he tries to explain it to me. But I do know that it affects poor people more than it does people with money. And the story that to me just recently that really made this so clear was a Globe story, front page story about a couple who'd lost their jobs. I mean, inflation is this sort of thing, this nebulous thing out there. And if you're not, yes, you know, those of us who, you know, own a home and can go buy eggs without it breaking the bank, you know, if we don't think about this enough, all you have to do is read a story like this. You know, 2 people who had jobs, who were making it go, and through no fault of their own, found themselves living in a tent, you know, somewhere. The woman, there was a picture, I can't remember who took it, Suzanne Kreider maybe took it, of the mother feeding her child with the light from her iPhone at night so that she could see what. That tells you the story, doesn't it? This is impacting poor people, and then middle class people who, because of the economy and the whole job situation, lose their lifeline. And boy, that story just brings it all home. And maybe we as journalists ought to be doing more and more of that to really drive the point home to people.
Absolutely. All right, now I am going to turn the table on you all and hear what your favorite story or biggest story of the year is. And I'm going to start with Attorney Joseph Feaster.
Wow. Well, my biggest story would be in terms of my 12-year-old grandson and how much he has he's done well academically, socially, and athletically. He loves his grandpa to death. I'm in charge, and he knows it. And I think, you know, to the point of, you know, going to some of what Linda was just talking about with inflation, is our responsibility to take care of those who are close to us and provide the types of guidance to our young people. So for me, it's, you know, it's with that familial thing in terms of taking care, in terms of with the family. The other one that I would say is the change that I've come with my, you know, the new law firm I'm with, Dain Torpy. Having left my previous firm, McKinsey & Associates, after 24 years. This has been an extraordinary experience for me to come here. I now have a new tagline, and I might as well do a little promotion here. That now I can provide services from occupancy to, from concept to occupancy. So my sense is I'm really happy here, doing a lot of mentoring to young lawyers. You know, I've been at this 46 years, Tony. So for that, it's been great. So those are some of the things. My grandson and, of course, my family in general, wife and daughter. But the main thing is in terms of family, some of the organizational pieces, job-wise, and the last one would be the Urban League, as I mentioned earlier, the things that we're doing there. So it's been a great year. My health is good, so I'm looking forward to a prosperous 2023.
Adrian, favorite story or thing of this past year?
My favorite story this year was Election Day. And it's because, democracy was really under siege. And we can say that it dodged a bullet. And I guess that's true. But, to my mind, the good guys mostly won. The Democrats held the Senate. The election deniers lost. Bad for Trump. So to me, that was all good.
And Linda.
Oh, good. I was hoping nobody else would say this, so I get to go on about it. My favorite story, not the most important story of the year, the favorite news story is the ongoing craziness over Boston sports. I have become a voracious reader of, listener of, watcher of every sport imaginable, but mostly I love the weirdo storylines, like the Ime Udoka storyline. I was fascinated by what did he really do? Who was he involved with? Blah, blah, blah. Joe Mazzulla, how did he get that job and how's he doing? And then I shifted from that to something else, and then there was the Brady story. So now I'm and the Patriots story, and I am addicted to sports talk radio, which really is traumatizing me in a way. But I can't get enough of Tom's demise, and now Bill Belichick. Was it Belichick? Was it Brady all along? And what about Mac Jones? And I'm fascinated. But you know what? I just think those who poo-poo sports, nobody in this group, I know, but those who do, who put their noses up in the air, don't understand that sports are stories. It's about stories. It's about the people, and it's about the rise and fall of greatness. And it's about getting older and wanting to stay doing what you're doing. And it's strategy. It's, to me, isn't this crazy? Who would have thought in my retirement I would just become a sports fanatic? But these are incredible stories, and they continue to unfold. And we are now probably going to see some changes at the Patriots as a result of, can I say it? Can I even speak it now? At the Sunday game, that was the most incredible loss of the Patriots, and that was ridiculous, craziness past. But I think we're going to see some big changes. And I heard some announcers say, if you were born post the 90s or before post the 90s, you don't know what it's like not to have a fantastic Patriots team or winning sports teams. You know, many of us have been around long enough to just bask in the glory of it, whether it's the Celtics or and we've got the Celtics too now. We're in a bit of a funk, and the Bruins are doing great. So how do you take all those stories and parse through them? And I will continue to go down that rabbit hole because I'm fascinated. And also, I have to just say, my granddaughter's the light of my life, and I know yours is, Tonya, as well. So yeah, cheers to grandchildren who, as somebody wrote, fill the hole in your heart that you didn't know you had.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you all, Linda, Adrian, and Attorney Fisa, for joining me on the PowerPLAY Show's season finale. Year 3 is done. We're back next month. Thank you. We're back next month with my annual season premiere tradition, Artist Extraordinaire, and my dear friend, Rob Stull. Until next year on the PowerPLAY Show, I'm Tonya McGrath, and everyone have a happy and safe holiday season.
Same to you, Tonya.
Same to you.